She didn't fight back. That's the part I can't get out of my head, even now. Patrick was pointing his finger 2 inches from her face, his mother standing behind him with her arms crossed like she'd won something. The suitcase was already at Ada's feet. Someone had packed it for her. They'd actually gone upstairs, opened her closet, and packed her bags before she'd even gotten home that evening. And Ada just stood there, quiet, eyes wet, hands clasped in front of her, jaw tight. I was in the doorway. They didn't see me yet. And in that moment, watching her hold herself completely still while 2 people dismantled 8 months of her life in their foyer, I knew something they didn't. Ada wasn't crying because she'd lost. She was crying because she'd won a long time ago. I need to back up. Because if I start from that night in the foyer, none of it makes sense. You'd look at the picture, a crying woman, a man pointing a packed bag on a marble floor, and you'd call it a tragedy. It wasn't. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm a family attorney based out of Providence, Rhode Island. And I've known Patrick Connolly since we were both 22 years old and failing the same constitutional law class at Georgetown. We were not close exactly. Patrick wasn't built for close, but we kept in touch the way men like him keep in touch. The occasional dinner when business brought us to the same city, a text when our teams played each other, a wedding invitation when the time came. His wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday in early spring. The cardstock alone probably cost more than my first car. Mr. Patrick James Connolly and Miss Adiz Okafor, on Newport, Rhode Island. I remember turning it over in my hands, trying to picture Patrick with a woman named Adiz Okafor, and coming up blank. I called him. "Tell me about her." "She's from Houston," he said, like that explained everything. "That's it?" "She works in nonprofit housing, affordable housing advocacy, that kind of thing." A pause. "She's different, Marcus. She's not like anyone I've met up here." I didn't go to the wedding. I had a trial. I sent a gift and a handwritten card, and I thought about Patrick Connolly maybe once every few months after that, until his mother called me. Helen Connolly called me on a Thursday evening while I was still at my desk going over discovery documents. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Her voice on the phone was the same as I remembered, precise, dry, the kind of voice that had never asked for anything in its life, only stated what it expected to receive. "Marcus," she said, "I need you to come to Newport, this weekend if possible." "Helen, what's going on?" "It's a family matter." Her tone flattened on the word family in a way that made it clear she was using the word loosely. "Patrick is making a decision I believe will expose him legally. I'd like your counsel before he acts." I asked what kind of decision. She said, "He's asking Adiz to leave." I remember the sound of my own chair as I leaned back. Outside my window, the Providence waterfront was going gray in the early evening. There was a ferry out there somewhere, lights just coming on. "Helen," I said carefully, "that's a divorce matter. I don't do family law." "I know what you do," she said. "But I'm not calling you for the divorce. I'm calling you because Patrick believes he has grounds to remove her from the property without going through proper legal channels. He wants to do it this weekend, before the end of the month. I want you to tell him he can't." I should have said no. I had a trial starting Monday. I had 3 active cases and a deposition on Friday afternoon. But there was something in Helen's voice underneath the usual control. Not fear, exactly. More like the careful stillness of someone standing at the edge of something they can't see the bottom of. "I'll come Saturday," I said. I drove down from Providence on a cold Saturday morning. The kind of October day where the trees are all burning orange and gold and the sky is a hard, flat gray that doesn't apologize for it. Newport in the fall does something to you. All that old money sitting quiet behind the hedges, the ocean somewhere close, the air smelling like salt and expensive things. The Connolly house was on Bellevue Avenue. Not one of the famous mansions. Those were tourist attractions now, full of school groups and audio tours, but close enough to borrow their weight. A wide federal-style home, white with black shutters, hydrangea beds gone brown for the season. The kind of house that had been in the same family long enough that no one remembered buying it. I parked on the street and sat in my car for a moment. Something felt wrong. I couldn't name it. I'd been to this house twice before, both times for holiday parties, both times with a crowd of people moving through the rooms with cocktails and holiday sweaters. Standing outside it alone in October, looking up at those dark windows. Just the feeling was different. I got out and rang the bell. Patrick answered. He was in a suit already, even on a Saturday. Charcoal gray pinstripe, no tie, red shirt underneath, the kind of outfit that said I'm not trying while trying very hard. He looked thinner than I remembered. His jaw was tight. "Marcus," he shook my hand. Firm, too firm. "Patrick." I stepped inside. The foyer smelled like fresh flowers and old wood and something underneath both of those things that I couldn't identify. Lemon, maybe, or something more chemical. The kind of clean that means someone had been scrubbing. "Where's Ada?" I asked. Something crossed his face. "She's upstairs. She doesn't know you're here." "You didn't tell her?" "No." I looked at him for a beat. "Patrick, come to the study," he said. "My mother's waiting." Helen Connolly was standing at the window when we walked in, looking out at the back garden where the last of the season's roses were hanging on. She was in navy blue, hair up, pearl earrings. 71 years old and still built like a woman who had never lost an argument. She turned when I came in. "Thank you for coming." "Tell me what's happening," I said. I didn't sit down. Patrick took the chair behind the desk. His mother stayed at the window. Between them, they proceeded to give me the version of the story they'd agreed on. I could tell it was agreed on because they didn't interrupt each other once, and Patrick Connolly had never in his life gotten through 3 sentences without interrupting someone. The short version. Ada had been in the house 8 months. The marriage had been rushed. They used the word believed, not knew, that Ada had been less than honest about her background and her intentions. There was something about a meeting she'd had, someone she'd been seen with, a phone call Patrick had overheard that he couldn't fully explain. "What kind of meeting?" I asked. Patrick's jaw tightened. "She met with a federal official, here in Providence. I found out by accident. She'd said she was visiting a friend." "Who was the official?" "I don't know exactly. Someone from the housing department. HUD, maybe." The room went quiet. I looked at Patrick, then at Helen, then back at Patrick. "And that's what you're basing this on," I said. "A meeting you found out about secondhand that you can't fully identify." "There's more," Helen said from the window. Her voice was careful. "There are documents. She has documents in this house, in a locked case in the bedroom, that Patrick has not been permitted to see. She keeps her laptop password protected. She takes calls in another room." "That's called privacy," I said. "In a marriage," Helen said, "privacy of that particular kind is suspicious." I took a breath. "Helen, what do you actually think she's doing here?" Silence. Patrick looked at the desk. Helen looked at the garden. And in that silence, the thing I couldn't name in the driveway took shape. They were scared. Not of Ada, of what Ada might know. I didn't say that out loud, not yet. I told them I needed to review the property deed, the marriage certificate, and any documentation they had before anyone did anything. Patrick nodded too quickly. Helen turned back to the window. I asked where Ada was. "She's still upstairs," Patrick said. "I'd like to speak with her." Another look between them. "That's not necessary right now," Patrick said. "Patrick," I kept my voice level, "I came here to give you legal counsel. Let me do that. I need to speak with your wife." He didn't answer right away. And in those 3 seconds of silence, I heard footsteps on the stairs, light footsteps, careful ones, the kind that had learned not to make noise in this house. The study door was open. I turned. Ada Ockefer Connolly was standing in the hallway, looking in. She was in a teal dress, probably dressed for something, or just the kind of woman who dressed well even at home. And she had the posture of someone who had walked into a room and immediately understood every dynamic in it. She looked at Patrick, at Helen, then at me. "I don't think we've met," she said. Her voice was calm, completely, unnervingly calm. "Marcus Webb," I said. "Patrick and I went to law school together." "I know who you are," she said. She didn't move from the doorway. "Patrick's mentioned you. You're based in Providence now, family estate and property law." I nodded. Her eyes went back to Patrick. Something passed across her face, something I couldn't read, not then. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't even hurt. It was more like the look of someone checking a calculation they'd already run and confirming it came out right. "Okay," she said quietly, almost to herself. Then she went back up the stairs. I didn't sleep well in the guest room that night. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. It's held, like the walls were full of something waiting to get out. I lay on top of the covers with my shoes still on and stared at the ceiling and thought about Ada's face in that doorway. The way she'd said okay to herself, like she'd just confirmed something she'd written down weeks ago. I've been in law long enough to know what guilty looks like. I've also been in it long enough to know what prepared looks like. Those are two very different things. I got up at 6 and went downstairs. The kitchen was empty, the coffee maker already running. Someone had been up before me. I poured a cup and stood at the kitchen window looking out at the backyard, the rose beds, the stone path leading down to a side gate. The garden was the kind that took years of attention. Somebody loved it once. "You take it black?" I turned. Ada was at the kitchen table. She had a mug already, a legal pad in front of her, a pen in her hand. She was in a gray sweater now, hair pulled back, no jewelry. She looked like she'd been up for hours. "Yeah," I said. "Good." She looked back at her notepad. "Patrick doesn't. He takes it with oat milk and 2 sugars. Helen takes tea. Nobody in this house takes it black except me." She said it without looking up, like she was noting a small, meaningless detail. "Pull up a chair." I sat down across from her. She put the pen down, looked at me directly. She had the kind of eyes that made you feel like the conversation had already started 3 exchanges back and you were catching up. "Why are you really here, Marcus?" "Helen called me. She's concerned Patrick is about to make a legal mistake." "That's the reason you were given," she said. "What do you think the real reason is?" I wrapped both hands around my mug. "I think Helen is worried. About more than the marriage." Ada nodded slowly. She picked up her pen, turned it over once, set it back down. "Did they tell you about the meeting?" "Patrick mentioned it." "HUD," she said. "He thinks it was HUD." A small pause. "It wasn't HUD." I watched her. "I'm not going to tell you who it was," she said. "Not this morning. But I want you to understand something, Marcus, because you seem like someone who actually thinks before he talks." She leaned forward slightly. "I have done nothing wrong. Nothing illegal, nothing unethical, nothing that hurts Patrick or this family. But there are people in this house who cannot say the same thing. And they know that. And that is why your phone rang on Thursday." The coffee was hot. I drank it and said nothing. "Helen didn't call you to protect Patrick from a legal mistake," Ada said. "She called you because she wanted someone in this house who could witness that everything was done properly, cleanly. So that when I leave, because she's already decided I'm leaving, there's a lawyer present who can say it all looked above board." I set my mug down. "Ada, am I wrong?" I didn't answer. She nodded again. That same small, confirming nod. "Okay," she said, for the second time since I'd arrived. She picked up her pen and went back to her notepad. I watched her write for a moment. Her handwriting was small and precise, the kind you develop when you've taken a lot of notes by hand for a long time. "Where'd you go to school?" I asked. "University of Houston for undergrad, then UT Austin for my master's in public policy." She didn't look up. "My mother came here from Enugu, Nigeria, in her late 20s with $40 and the name of one person she could call if things got bad. She cleaned houses for 6 years, saved every extra dollar, and put me and my 2 brothers through private school on a hospital administrator's salary." She paused. "I want you to know that, because people in this house have a habit of assuming things about where I came from." "What do they assume?" She looked up. "That I got lucky." I didn't see much of Patrick that morning. He came down around 9, ate toast standing at the counter, checked his phone 3 times in 4 minutes, and left to take a call in the study. Helen appeared at 10, dressed like she was receiving guests, and proceeded to ignore Ada's presence at the table with the particular skill of someone who had practiced ignoring people for decades. Ada ignored the ignoring. She made eggs, offered some to Helen. Helen declined without turning around. Ada ate alone at the table, reading something on her phone, completely unbothered. I watched this from the living room doorway and tried to assemble a picture. In the weeks that followed, I'd come back twice more before the night everything broke open. I'd fill in the gaps, piece by piece, the way you do in my work. A detail here, a document there, a phone call that adds a new dimension to one you'd already had. Here's what I eventually understood about Ada Okafor. She had come to Newport the way she'd come to everything in her life, with a plan, not a cold plan, not a mercenary one, but a plan born from years of watching systems chew up the people she grew up with and spit them out, and deciding that instead of writing reports about it from the outside, she was going to go inside. She'd been working in affordable housing advocacy in Houston for 4 years when she first connected with the organization that would change the direction of her life. Not a nonprofit exactly. A federal task force, unofficial, operating under the umbrella of a housing oversight office, that had been quietly building a case against a network of property management companies accused of systematically defrauding low-income tenants. False fees, unlawful evictions, maintenance neglect deliberately used to push out tenants so properties could be repositioned for higher-income renters. The network stretched across 6 states. Now, one of the companies in the network had Rhode Island roots. Ada had been recruited as a civilian consultant, not an agent, not law enforcement, just someone with expertise and access who could help the task force understand how the advocacy side worked, what documentation existed, which organizations had the most credible complaints. It was unpaid. It was quiet. It was exactly the kind of work she'd built her career toward. And then, at a conference in Boston, she met Patrick Connolly. She told me all of this. Not that first morning, but over the course of those 3 visits, usually in the kitchen early, before the house woke up. She had a way of giving information in layers, a little more each time, like she was deciding how much to trust me in real time, adjusting as she went. "Did you know who he was?" I asked her once. "When you met him at the conference." She thought about it. "I knew his family had real estate holdings in Rhode Island. I didn't know the extent." She paused. "He was kind to me at that conference. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. That's rarer than you'd think in those rooms." Something moved across her face. "I fell in love with who I thought he was. That part was real." "And the case?" "The case was already running before I met him," she said. "I was already involved. Meeting Patrick didn't start it, but it changed my access." She looked at her coffee. "I reported that to my contact immediately. She gave me a choice, step back from the case or keep going and manage the conflict of interest carefully. I chose to keep going. I kept my contact informed of everything, every meeting, every document, and every conversation that touched anything relevant." "And you never told Patrick?" "No." "Why?" She looked at me. "Because Patrick knew. He just chose not to look at it directly. And there's a difference between keeping a secret from someone and protecting someone from the consequences of what they have already chosen to ignore." That answer sat with me for a long time after she said it. The second visit, in late October, I arrived to find the temperature in the house had dropped about 15 degrees from the first. Not literal temperature. The other kind. Patrick had hired his own attorney by then, a man named Gerald Foster, Newport Old Guard, the kind of lawyer who wore suspenders unironically. Gerald was drawing up a legal separation agreement. Patrick had, in the space of 3 weeks, gone from a man with vague suspicions to a man with a plan. Helen's influence was visible in every corner of that plan. The language, the timing, the particular way it had been structured to minimize what Ada could claim. Ada had seen the draft. She'd read it at the kitchen table, set it down, and asked me to look at it. I read it. Then I read it again. "This is designed to remove you as quickly as possible," I said. "Yes." "And they think you'll sign it?" "Yes." "Will you?" She looked at me over the top of her reading glasses. "What do you think?" I smiled despite myself. "I think no." "I'm going to need a few more weeks," she said. "I'm not asking you to help me fight it. I'm asking you to slow it down, procedurally. Just enough." "Ada," I leaned forward. "I need to understand what you're waiting for." She was quiet for a moment. See, outside, the October wind moved through the hydrangeas. "There's a press conference," she said finally. "In 3 weeks. Federal Housing Oversight Office in Providence. It's going to be significant." I waited. "I need to still be in this house when it happens," she said. "Not for me, for the record. Because if I've already been removed, if they've already successfully pushed me out before that announcement, it looks like something it isn't." What does it look like? It looks like I was running, she said quietly, and I've never run from anything in my life. The third week of November, I drove back to Newport on a Sunday. The trees had given up by then. Everything was bare and gray, and the wind off the ocean had teeth in it. I had my collar up the whole walk from the car to the front door, and I still felt it in my chest. Patrick answered again, same as the first time, except this time he didn't shake my hand. She called you, he said. I had questions about the separation documents, I said. Gerald's language on the property clause is going to create problems. His jaw moved. He stepped back and let me in. The house felt different this time. I couldn't immediately say how. Same furniture, same smell of old wood and something clean underneath, but the air in the rooms had shifted. Tighter, like everyone inside had been breathing it too long without opening a window. Helen was in the sitting room off the foyer, on the phone. She glanced at me when I came in and turned slightly away, lowering her voice. Patrick went toward the study without another word. I stood in the foyer for a moment. Then Ada came down the stairs. She was in a dark green wrap dress, the hair down, carrying a folder. She looked like she'd been working. She looked, as she always looked in this house, like she was the only person in it who knew exactly what she was doing. "Kitchen," she said quietly. I followed her. She made tea this time, set a mug in front of me without asking, put one together for herself, and sat down. The folder went on the table between us. "Open it," she said. I opened it. Inside were photocopies, financial documents, the kind that take a trained eye to read, but once you know what you're looking at, you can't unsee. Property transfer records, LLC registrations, a chain of shell companies, each one thin as paper, each one pointing back to a parent company registered in Delaware. A name appeared 4 times across 3 separate documents, Connolly Property Group. I looked up. How long have you had these?" I asked. "Long enough," she said. "These are copies. The originals are with my contact." "Ada," I kept my voice even, "these implicate the family and the fraud network." "Peripherally," she said. "They're not the center of it. They're one branch." "But yes." She wrapped both hands around her mug. 3 Rhode Island properties, all managed under the Connolly Group banner. All 3 had tenant complaints filed, illegal fee structures, 2 unlawful eviction proceedings, 1 building where maintenance requests went unanswered for 11 months, while the company quietly applied for repositioning permits. My chest felt tight. "Does Patrick know what's in these?" "Patrick," she said carefully, "knows that his family's company has some compliance issues. That's how it was explained to him. Compliance issues. Like a parking ticket." Her voice didn't rise. It just went flat. He chose to understand it that way, because understanding it the other way meant doing something about it. "And Helen?" Ada looked at her mug. "Helen knows exactly what it is." The kitchen was quiet. Somewhere in the house I could hear Helen's voice still on the phone, the low murmur of it through 2 walls. "The press conference," I said. 10 days, Ada said. "What gets announced?" "The task force goes public. 12 companies across 6 states. Names, documents, a summary of findings. It's been building for 2 years." She paused. "The Connolly Group is in the appendix, not headline. Appendix, but it's there. And once it's public, the separation agreement they're trying to get me to sign becomes a very different document." I sat back. "Because if you sign before the announcement—" "I waive any claim to information I obtained during the marriage," she said, "including anything I observed about the company's practices. Gerald wrote that clause very deliberately." She looked at me. "Helen wrote it. Gerald just typed it." I thought about Helen on the phone in the next room, the careful stillness I'd felt in her the very first time she'd called me, the way she'd framed everything. "Patrick is making a decision. I want your counsel. Come before the end of the month. Getting me here. Getting a witness here. Getting everything moving before the deadline she knew was coming, and I didn't." "She knows about the press conference," I said. "She has a source in the oversight office," Ada said. "Or she did. That channel went quiet about 6 weeks ago, which is how I know the task force found the leak." She almost smiled. "They're good at what they do." "Ada," I leaned forward, "I have to ask you something directly." "Okay. Did you marry Patrick to get access to those documents?" The kitchen went still. Ada looked at me for a long time, long enough that I started to regret asking. Then she set down her mug, folded her hands on the table, and answered me. "No," she said. "I married Patrick because I loved him, or I loved who I believed he was." Her voice was steady, but something in it had weight. The documents I found because I was already in the house, already involved with the task force, and already paying attention to things most people wouldn't notice. I didn't go looking. I was already looking. There's a difference. You should have told him. "Yes," she said. "Ma, I should have, and I didn't, because I was afraid of exactly what happened, that he'd panic and run to his mother, and the whole thing would collapse before anyone could be held responsible." She paused. "I made a choice. It cost me the marriage. I've made my peace with that." I didn't say anything. "I'm not asking for your absolution, Marcus," she said quietly. "I'm just asking you not to slow walk the process against me when the time comes. I did what I did. I'll own it. But I'm not signing that document." 3 days before the press conference, things inside that house moved faster than I expected. I got a call from Ada on a Tuesday evening. She was in her car, parked down the street. Her voice was low. "Someone went through my room," she said. "What was taken?" "Nothing. They didn't find what they were looking for." A pause. "The locked case. They tried to get it open. The lock has a scratch on it that wasn't there this morning." "Where are the documents?" "Not in the case," she said. "They haven't been in the case for 3 weeks." "Where are they?" "Safe," she said. "Marcus, I need you to come Friday. The press conference is Friday." "I know," she said. "I need you to be in that house on Friday." Something in her voice, not fear, not exactly. More like the feeling of watching a long-running calculation finally arrive at its answer. Controlled, focused, the way she always sounded, but underneath it, something that had been held tightly for a very long time and was about to be put down. "Ada," I said. "Are you okay?" A silence, the kind with texture. "I will be," she said. "I told her I'd come Friday. But I drove down Friday morning and let myself in. Ada had given me a key on my second visit, which I suspected Patrick didn't know about and Helen definitely didn't. The house was quiet when I arrived. I went to the kitchen, started coffee, and waited. Patrick came in at 9. He was already in the gray pinstripe suit, the red shirt. The bag he'd placed at the foot of the stairs, I passed it on my way to the kitchen, a duffel and a rolling carry-on, told me he was planning to be somewhere else by end of day. Helen came down at 9:30. Navy dress, pearl earrings, arms folded before she'd even fully reached the ground floor. Neither of them acknowledged the fact that I was in their kitchen drinking their coffee until Patrick walked in and stopped short. "Marcus, you're here early." "Ada asked me to come," I said. "Eat her property documentation questions." His face moved. "She has no right." "She's still your wife," I said, "legally, until she isn't. So yes, she does." Helen appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes went from me to the coffee to the window and back, calculating, always calculating. "Where is she?" Patrick asked. "Upstairs," I said. He nodded once, set his jaw, and then he went back into the hallway, and I heard his feet on the stairs, heavy and deliberate. Helen stayed in the doorway watching me. "You know, Marcus," she said, "I've always liked you." "I appreciate that, Helen." "You're careful," she said. "You think before you act. That's a rare quality." She tilted her head slightly. "I hope you're thinking carefully right now." I looked at her over my coffee cup. I always do. She held my gaze for 3 seconds. Then she turned and went back toward the sitting room. Upstairs, a door opened, then voices. Patrick's first, sharp, controlled at the edges but fraying in the middle, then Ada's, lower. I couldn't make out the words, just the rhythm of it, his voice rising, hers staying flat, then footsteps, multiple sets, and then they were both coming down the stairs and Helen was coming out of the sitting room, and I moved from the kitchen into the hallway doorway and stood there. The foyer. All 4 of us. Patrick had the bag in his hand, the rolling case at his feet. His finger was up, pointing at Ada 2 inches from her face. Helen had moved to his side, arms folded, weight settled into her hips like a woman who had already decided how this scene ended. And Ada was standing at the bottom of the stairs, hands clasped in front of her, eyes wet, a jaw tight, still, completely, eerily still. Patrick was saying something about the documents, about the case she kept locked, about trust and lies and how she'd brought something into his house, that she had no right to bring. Ada didn't answer. She just looked at him with those eyes that always seemed to be 3 steps ahead, and she was crying. I could see that, the wet tracks on her cheeks, but her hands weren't shaking, and her voice, when she finally spoke, was the same voice she'd used every single morning in that kitchen. "I know," she said. "I know you think you've handled this." Patrick's finger dropped slightly. "Excuse me, the documents you're looking for aren't in the case," she said. "They've never been in the case. They're in Providence. They've been in Providence for 6 weeks. She looked at Helen. You already know that, Helen. Your source told you before the channel went quiet." Helen's face didn't change, but her weight shifted, just slightly. "The press conference is in 4 hours, Ada said. "Whatever you do in this foyer right now, whatever you say, whatever you put in writing, whatever this is, happens 4 hours before this family's company becomes a matter of public record." She looked at Patrick. "I want you to understand that clearly. Not as a threat, as a fact." Patrick stared at her. Ada looked at me, just for a second, the smallest look. Then she looked back at Patrick and waited. Patrick put the bag down, not gently. He dropped it, and the thud of it on the marble floor was the loudest thing in the room for a full 3 seconds. 4 hours, he said. 4 hours, Ada said. He laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind that comes out when someone is trying to find solid ground and keeps missing it. He ran one hand through his hair, looked at the ceiling, looked at Helen, looked back at Ada. "You've been building a case against my family," he said, "while living in my house, while sleeping in my bed." "I was already involved with the task force before I met you," Ada said. "I've said that. That doesn't make it." He stopped, started again. "You should have told me." "Yes," she said, "I should have." The directness of it seemed to knock something loose in him. He'd been braced for denial, for counterattack, for the defensive spiral he'd probably rehearsed this conversation around. Her agreeing with him had nowhere to land. "Then why didn't you?" he said. Quieter now, the anger losing its shape. Ida looked at him for a long moment, and this time what crossed her face wasn't calculation. It was something older and more tired than that. "Because you already knew, Patrick," she said. "You knew the company had problems. You knew what kind of problems. Your mother explained it to you as a compliance issue, and you accepted that explanation because it was easier. And I knew that if I told you the full scope of what I was doing, you'd go straight to her, and she would have shut it down, and 12 companies across 6 states would have had 4 more years to keep doing what they were doing to people who had no way to fight back." Patrick's face was doing something complicated. His mouth was open slightly. His eyes had gone from sharp to something rawer underneath. "So you chose the case over the marriage," he said. I chose the people in those buildings over the marriage," she said. "Yes, and I will own that for the rest of my life. But Patrick," her voice dropped, "you made a choice too. You just made yours earlier and quieter, and nobody's asking you to own it." The room held its breath. Helen moved first. She walked from Patrick's side toward the sitting room doorway, deliberately, like a woman repositioning on a chessboard. When she turned back, her face had the quality of someone who has decided to change strategies mid-game. "This is very moving," Helen said, "and entirely irrelevant." She looked at me. "Marcus, the separation agreement stands. Whatever is announced at a press conference this afternoon doesn't change the terms Patrick is offering." "It changes them significantly," I said. "Until it does not." "Helen," I set my coffee down on the foyer table. "The waiver clause in Section 4 of that agreement asks Ada to waive rights to any information obtained during the marriage. If the task force announcement this afternoon references the Connolly Group, and Ada has demonstrable knowledge of those practices gained during the marriage, that clause becomes an attempt to suppress a material witness. Gerald knows that. You know that. That document cannot be signed today." Helen's eyes didn't move from my face. Gerald made a mistake," I said, "or he made a choice. Either way, that clause doesn't survive a federal housing fraud disclosure. If Patrick signs that agreement today and Ada signs it today, both of them are potentially exposed to obstruction questions. I won't let that happen." Silence. Patrick looked at Helen. the look of a man who has just realized the person he trusted most in the room may have been operating on a different set of interests than his own. "Mom," he said carefully. "Did Gerald know about the press conference?" Helen said nothing. "Mom." "Gerald was protecting this family," she said. Her voice had gone very precise, every word placed exactly. "Did he know," Patrick said, "about the federal announcement?" Another silence, longer this time, and that silence was its own answer. Patrick sat down on the stairs, just sat down, right there on the third step, in his gray pinstripe suit, and put his head in his hands. I'd seen a lot of things in conference rooms and courtrooms over the years. I'd seen people learn hard things. But there's something particular about watching a man realize that the person who raised him has been managing him, not protecting him, managing him, and that the management has put him in a worse position than the truth would have. Ada didn't move toward him. She stood where she was, hands still clasped, and watched him with an expression that wasn't triumph and wasn't pity. It was something in between that I didn't have a clean name for. Helen stood at the sitting room doorway and said nothing. Her arms had come uncrossed. They hung at her sides now, and for the first time since I'd arrived at this house 7 weeks ago, she looked her age. "How long have you known?" Patrick said. He was talking to Helen. He didn't look up. "Long enough to try to protect what we've built," she said. That's not what I asked." "Patrick, how long?" His voice cracked on the second word. Not rage, something worse. The kind of fracture that happens when a structure has been under pressure too long and finally gives. Helen inhaled. 2 years, she said. "I've known for 2 years that the task force existed. I didn't know Ada was connected to it until 4 months ago." Patrick lifted his head, looked at his mother. 2 years. I was handling it. You were handling it. He repeated it the way you repeat something when you're trying to decide if it means what you think it means. The company was under federal investigation, and you were handling it. I was managing the exposure, restructuring the properties. I had legal counsel. "Gerald," Patrick said. "Yes." "The same Gerald who wrote a separation agreement designed to silence my wife." Helen's jaw tightened. "To protect the family from a woman who, she's not the problem, Mom." Patrick stood up. He wasn't loud. That was the thing. He was very, very quiet. "She was never the problem. She came into this house and she did her job and she fell in love with me and I—" He stopped. Something moved in his throat. "I let you turn her into the problem because it was easier than looking at what you'd been doing." The foyer was absolutely silent. Ada's hands had come unclasped. She stood with her arms at her sides now and she was still crying, quietly, the tears just running without ceremony. But she wasn't looking at Patrick with anger. She was looking at him the way you look at someone when you've given up on a version of them and you're trying to see the real one clearly, maybe for the first time. I stayed in the kitchen doorway. This wasn't my moment, I knew that. "Ada," Patrick turned to her. His voice had lost all the precision, all the careful control. "I'm sorry." She nodded once. "I don't expect—" He stopped, started again. "I know that doesn't fix anything." "No," she said quietly. "It doesn't." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his bag from the floor and his rolling case, and he walked to the front door. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, didn't look back. "The house is yours until we sort out the legal side," he said. "Take whatever time you need." Then he opened the door and walked out into the cold Newport morning. And the door didn't slam. It closed with a soft final click that was somehow worse. Helen didn't move for a long time after Patrick left. She stood at the sitting room doorway with her arms at her sides and her chin level and her face arranged into something that was almost composure, but had a hairline fracture running through it that I didn't think she knew I could see. Ada looked at her. "Helen," she said, "you should call your own attorney today, not Gerald, someone independent." Helen's eyes moved to Ada. Something shifted in them, not softness. Helen Connolly didn't do softness, but something that might have been, under about 40 years of armor, a complicated form of respect. "You're giving me legal advice," she said. "I'm giving you practical advice," Ada said. "What happens this afternoon is happening whether we're standing here or not. You have 4 hours to get ahead of it." A pause. "I'm not your enemy, Helen. I never was. I was just doing my job." Helen looked at her for a long time. Then she turned and walked toward the study, and I heard her pick up the phone. I stayed. I'm not sure why exactly. Professional obligation, maybe, or something simpler. I didn't want to leave Ada alone in that house. She'd earned someone staying. She went to the kitchen and stood at the counter, and for a while she didn't do anything. Just stood there with her back to me, hands flat on the granite, head down. Her shoulders moved once, just once. I made more coffee. Set a fresh cup next to her without a word. She picked it up, drank it. My mother made jollof rice when things were hard, she said. Her voice was rough now, the controlled layer worn off. Not for comfort, exactly, just because there was always work to do, and work helped. She stared into the mug. I haven't made jollof rice in 8 months. This kitchen didn't feel like mine. I didn't say anything. I want to go home, she said. It wasn't a dramatic statement. It came out small and tired, the way the truest things often do. Not today, but soon. I want to be somewhere that smells like something I recognize. Houston, I said. Houston, she said. Outside, the November wind moved through the bare hydrangeas, and the gray sky sat heavy over the ocean, and the world went on doing what it always did, indifferent to what had just cracked open inside this white house on Bellevue Avenue. Ada's phone buzzed on the counter. She looked at it, set down her coffee. Her face went very still. She turned the phone toward me. The text was from a Providence number I didn't recognize. 4 words. We're starting in an hour. She put the phone face down on the counter, picked up her coffee, and for the first time since I'd arrived at this house 7 weeks ago, I saw her exhale all the way. The press conference started at noon. Ada didn't watch it live. I know because I was there. I'd driven to a coffee shop 2 blocks from the federal building in Providence. I needed to be somewhere else, somewhere that wasn't that house, and I pulled it up on my laptop at a corner table with a cup of coffee going cold beside me. The Federal Housing Oversight Coordinator stood at a podium and read from a prepared statement in the flat. A careful voice of someone who has rehearsed removing all drama from dramatic information. 12 companies, 6 states, a pattern of tenant fraud spanning several years, names of the companies listed in a supplementary document available on the department website. I pulled up the document, scrolled to the appendix. Connolly Property Group, Rhode Island, 3 properties, unlawful fee structures, 2 contested eviction proceedings, 1 building with documented maintenance failures over an extended period. Not the headline. The appendix. Exactly what Ada had said. I closed the laptop and sat for a while looking at my cold coffee. Then I drove back to Newport. The house was quiet when I let myself in. Helen's car was gone from the driveway. The study door was open, and the room was empty, and the particular quality of the silence said she'd been gone for a while. Ada was in the kitchen, but not at the table this time. She was on the floor, not collapsed, sitting. Back against the cabinet under the sink, knees pulled up, still in the green wrap dress, shoes off. Her phone was in her lap, face up, and on the screen I could see a long text thread going back hours. The name at the top was Mom. She looked up when I came in. Her eyes were swollen. She'd been crying for real this time, the kind that costs you something, and she hadn't tried to put herself back together before I arrived. "Hey," she said, "hey." I sat on the kitchen floor across from her. It seemed like the right thing to do. She looked back at her phone. My mom watched the press conference. She called me during it. I crying, and I couldn't pick up because I didn't trust my voice. She paused. She's been texting since. She keeps saying she's proud of me. Her mouth did something unsteady. I don't feel like someone who should be proud of right now. Why not? She turned the phone over in her hands. Because I came into a marriage and kept a secret that affected that marriage and told myself it was for the right reasons. And maybe it was. But the person who got hurt most directly was Patrick, and he wasn't even the one doing the worst things. He was just the one who chose not to look. She stopped. There's a version of this where I was very brave and very good, and there's another version where I was cold and I used people and I told myself a story about it that let me sleep. She looked at me. I don't know which version is true. Both, I said. She blinked. Both versions can be true, I said. You can do something for real reasons and still have it cost more than it should have. That's not a contradiction. That's just how hard things work. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Patrick called while I was sitting here. I waited. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. She looked at the phone. I haven't listened to it yet. You don't have to. I know. She set the phone face down on the tile. I keep thinking about the conference where we met, in Boston. He asked me what I actually believed about housing policy, not the technical stuff, the actual belief underneath it. Nobody at those conferences asks that. They talk about funding models and legislative strategy and metric frameworks. She almost smiled. He just said, "But what do you actually think is true?" Like it was the most natural question in the world. Her voice had gone soft. Not the controlled softness she used as a professional tool, the other kind, the kind that costs something to use. That was real, she said. Whatever else was complicated, that was real. He saw me that day. I know he did. She looked at the floor. And then we got here and he couldn't hold on to what he'd seen. His mother was louder than his own judgment and she stopped. I wanted him to choose me, not over his family, just not instead of himself. I wanted him to be the person he was in that conference room in Boston. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth for a second. He wasn't, she said, and I couldn't make him be. We sat on that kitchen floor for a while. At some point, Ada got up and actually made jollof rice. She had the ingredients. She'd bought them herself on a grocery run, she told me, the first time she'd cooked anything Nigerian in that kitchen. The smell of it filled the room slowly. Tomatoes and Scotch bonnet and thyme and something smoky underneath, the kind of smell that is a memory before it's even fully a smell. She cooked, and I stayed at the table and we talked, the way people talk when the crisis part is over and the real part begins. About her mother, who had come to Houston with $40 and one phone number and built something out of pure, exhausting will. About her brothers, one in Dallas doing something in finance, one still in Houston finishing a degree. About the apartment she'd kept in Houston while she was in Newport. A small one-bedroom she'd refused to give up even after the wedding, which Patrick had interpreted as a lack of commitment, and which she now understood had been her knowing something she wasn't ready to name. I kept paying the rent on it the whole time, she said, stirring the pot. Every month. Patrick thought I'd sublet it. I didn't. You were always going home, I said. I was always going home, she said. She tasted the rice, adjusted something. The kitchen was warm now, the windows starting to fog at the edges from the steam, and outside the November gray was going darker as the afternoon tipped toward evening. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She looked at it. My contact, she said. Claudette. She read the text. Something in her face shifted. Not relief, exactly. More like the release of a breath held so long you'd stopped noticing you were holding it. She says the announcement landed well. The documentation package was clean. The task force is moving to the next phase. What's the next phase? Remediation, Ada said. The companies have to make the tenants whole. Back fees, relocation costs, damages. For some of these families, she stopped, set the spoon down. Some of these families have been paying fake fees for years, thousands of dollars they couldn't afford, living in buildings with broken heat and mold because the company wouldn't fix anything and they couldn't afford to move. Her voice had gone very quiet. That's what it was for. That's what the whole thing was for. She picked the spoon back up. Not for the marriage, she said. Not for Patrick. Not for Helen. For that. She said it like she was reminding herself. Like, after everything, the months in this house, the locked case, the kitchen floor, the jollof rice, she needed to hear the reason out loud one more time to make sure it still held. It held. I could see it in her face when she said it, the way her shoulders settled, the way her chin came up slightly, the way she looked at the pot on the stove like it was the most important thing in the world, and she was going to give it the attention it deserved. Helen came back at 6. I heard the front door, the sound of heels on marble, a pause in the foyer. Then footsteps toward the kitchen. She stopped in the kitchen doorway, looked at Ada at the stove, looked at me at the table, looked at the pot and the steam and the particular domestic normalcy of the scene, on which I think she had not expected to find. Ada didn't turn around. There's enough if you're hungry, Helen. A long silence. I spoke with a new attorney, Helen said. Someone independent, as you suggested. Good, Ada said. He's recommending we cooperate fully with the remediation process. Another pause. He said it's the only path that limits further exposure. He's right, Ada said. Helen stood in the doorway for another moment. The pearl earrings, the navy dress, the careful, controlled posture of a woman who had built a life around never being caught off balance, standing in her own kitchen watching the woman she'd tried to push out cook dinner on her stove. "The rice smells good," Helen said. Her voice was stripped down to something almost plain. Ada turned from the stove, looked at Helen. Looked at her the way she'd looked at everything in this house, clearly, steadily, without flinching. "Sit down, Helen," she said, and Helen Connolly, 71 years old, owner of this house and this kitchen and most things in it, pulled out a chair and sat down. I left after dinner. Ada walked me to the door. Outside, the Newport night was cold and clear, the kind of clear that only happens when the wind has scrubbed every cloud out of the sky, and the stars over the ocean were sharp and close. "What happens now?" I asked. "I stay for another few weeks," she said, "legally. Then I go home." She said it simply. No weight on it anymore, just a fact about the future, clean and solid. "And the task force?" "My part is done," she said. "It's been done for a while. I just needed to be here for the record when it went public." She paused. "I'll probably write something about how the system works, or doesn't, how it looks from the inside of one of these cases, something useful." "Ada," I looked at her. "For what it's worth, I think you were brave." She looked at the stars for a moment. "I think I was stubborn," she said. "Brave and stubborn are the same thing until they're not, and you only find out which one you were after the fact." She smiled, the first real, unguarded smile I'd seen from her in 7 weeks. "Drive safe, Marcus," she said. She went back inside. The door clicked shut behind her, soft and final, the way doors do when the right person is on the right side of them. I stood on the front step for a moment in the cold Newport air, looking up at the stars over the ocean. And I thought about a woman who had come into a house that was never meant for her and had sat on its kitchen floor and cried and made jollof rice and held her ground through all of it. Then I walked to my car and drove home. 3 weeks later, Ada left Newport on a Tuesday morning. I know because she texted me when she got to the car. Just 2 words. Going home. I was at my desk in Providence, going over a property dispute that suddenly seemed very small. I put my phone down and sat there for a minute and felt something I didn't have a clean name for. Something like watching a long, difficult chapter close properly instead of just stopping. She'd told me the night before on the phone that she wasn't taking much. The clothes she'd brought from Houston, her laptop, the legal pad she'd filled and refilled over 8 months of early mornings in that kitchen. She was leaving the rest, the things bought for the Connolly house, chosen to fit the Connolly house, things that had never really been hers anyway. "Traveling light," I said. "I've always traveled light," she said. "I just forgot for a while." The drive from Newport to Houston took 2 days. She drove it alone, which I told her was unnecessary, and she told me she needed it, that she wanted the hours of road with nothing to do but think and listen to music and watch the country change outside her windows. She sent me one photo somewhere in Virginia, the highway opening up wide ahead of her, the sky enormous, the car pointed south and west toward something that looked like space. She called her mother from the road somewhere in Tennessee. Her mother, Ngozi Okafor, 63 years old, hospital administrator, Houston resident for 35 years, woman who had come to America with $40 and one phone number. Her mother cried the whole call. Ada told me this with a particular expression, the one she got when something moved her that she hadn't expected to be moved by. "She said she made pepper soup," Ada said. "She said she made it the morning I called to say I was coming, and she's been keeping it warm." "Pepper soup for 2 days?" I said. "She makes more when it runs low," Ada said. "She's been making it continuously. She said it doesn't matter, she'll make it until I get there." I thought about that. A woman in Houston keeping a pot of pepper soup warm on the stove for 2 days, waiting for her daughter to drive home through 6 states of American highway. "Yes, that's a good mother," I said. "That's the best mother," Ada said. She pulled into her mother's driveway on a Thursday evening just before dark. She told me the smell hit her before she got the car door open. The pepper soup coming through the kitchen window, finding her in the driveway, goat meat and tuziza leaves and crayfish, and that particular heat that is not just hot but deep, the kind that goes to the back of your throat and your chest and somewhere further in, somewhere that's less about taste and more about time, about every version of coming home she'd ever known. Her mother was at the door before Ada got up the porch steps. Ngozi Okafor was a small woman, Ada had told me, but she grabbed Ada the way small women grab when they mean it, both arms, full grip, nothing ceremonial about it. And Ada, who had held herself straight and level and controlled for 8 months in a house that was never hers, who had sat on a marble foyer floor and cried quietly so no one would hear, who had made calculations and held secrets and carried the weight of other people's choices on top of her own. Ada came apart, just for a few minutes, in her mother's driveway, in the dark, with the pepper soup smell coming through the window and the Houston night warm around them. Then she went inside and ate 2 bowls and slept for 11 hours. The story didn't end when Ada left Newport. These things never end cleanly. They trail. They settle slowly, like silt after a current passes through. The Connolly Group entered into a formal cooperation agreement with the federal task force 6 weeks after the press conference. The remediation process began. Back payments to affected tenants, relocation assistance for families who'd been unlawfully pushed out, a court-supervised monitoring period for the remaining properties. Helen's new attorney had been right. Cooperation was the only path that limited further damage. It didn't eliminate the damage, but it stopped the bleeding. Patrick gave a brief statement through counsel, acknowledging the company's compliance failures and committing to the remediation process. I read it in a Providence newspaper on a cold December morning. It was clean and legal and said exactly as much as attorneys advise their clients to say in these situations. Whether there was anything behind it besides legal strategy, I couldn't say. I thought about that voicemail Ada had never listened to. I never asked her what she eventually did with it. Some things don't need to be reported back. Gerald Foster, Helen's longtime attorney, quietly stepped back from the Connolly family's legal work in January. These things happen without announcements. You just stop seeing someone's name on the documents. Ada went back to work in Houston 2 weeks after she got home. Not her old nonprofit exactly. She'd been on extended leave, and there was some reorganizing to do, some conversations to have. But Claudette Burns, her contact from the task force, had apparently been doing more than running a federal investigation. She'd been watching how Ada worked, how she thought, how she moved through hard situations without losing herself in them. Claudette called Ada in mid-January. There was a new advisory position, federal housing oversight, with regional focus, Texas and Louisiana. It was the kind of role that got built around a specific person when the right person came along. It paid a real salary. It had teeth, actual authority to flag and investigate, not just write reports that sat on desks. Ada called me to tell me she'd accepted it. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Terrified," she said. "Good, both." "That sounds right." "Marcus?" She paused. "Thank you for staying. All those trips, you didn't have to." "I know. You kept things from going sideways legally when they could have. Patrick could have done something that exposed him badly. You stopped that." "I was doing my job," I said. "You were doing more than your job," she said. "You know that." I did know that. I just wasn't sure how to say it without making it sound bigger than it was. Sometimes you're in the right place and you stay, and that's all it is. It doesn't need a name. "Go change the world, Ada," I said. She laughed, a real one, full. The laugh of a woman who had been to the bottom of something and come back up and found her footing on the other side. "I'm going to try," she said. I drove back to Newport once more in late February. Not for a case, just, I'm not sure why. Professional habit, maybe. The need to close a loop. I parked on Bellevue Avenue and sat in my car looking at the White House with the black shutters and the bare hydrangea beds and the stone path leading to the side gate. The winter light was flat and pale. The ocean was somewhere nearby, the way it always was in Newport, present but invisible, felt more than seen. I thought about Ada on the kitchen floor in the green dress. I thought about Helen pulling out a chair and sitting down. I thought about the sound of a door clicking shut when the right person is on the right side of it. Then I thought about a woman somewhere in Houston, in a federal office that smelled like coffee and copy paper, with a legal pad and a pen and 2 bowls of her mother's pepper soup in her system, and the particular posture of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and why. I started the car. I've thought a lot about what Ada said on the porch that last night, about brave and stubborn being the same thing until they're not, and only finding out which one you were after the fact. I think she was both. I think she was brave because she was stubborn enough not to stop, and stubborn because she was brave enough not to pretend that stopping was the same as being safe. She came into a house that wanted to use her, or ignore her, or remove her, and she stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go. She had a 1-bedroom apartment in Houston with her name on the lease. She stayed because the work wasn't done, and people she would never meet were counting on it getting done, and she was the person in the position to do it. That's not the same as being cold. It's not the same as using people. It's what it looks like when someone takes seriously the idea that their skills and their position and their particular moment in a particular place mean something. That they're there for a reason. That walking away from what they can do because it's hard is its own kind of failure. Ada Okafor didn't walk away. She made jollof rice and answered her mother's texts and cried on the kitchen floor and held her ground and drove home through 6 states with the windows down and ate pepper soup in her mother's kitchen and then went back to work. That's the whole story. That's all of it. 8 months after she left Newport, Ada published an essay in a national housing policy journal. It was about tenant advocacy from the inside of a federal case. What worked, what didn't, what the system couldn't see about itself. It was read widely in the field. Claudette forwarded it to me with a 1-line message. She's exactly who I thought she was. I printed it and kept it on my desk. I still have it.